Book 11, Camilla's Finest Hour. Now, as dawn rose up and left her ocean bed, Aeneas, moved as he is by grief to pause and bury comrades, desolate with their deaths, still the victor pays his vows to the gods as first light breaks. An enormous oak, its branches lopped and trunk laid bare, he stakes on a mound, and decks with the burnished arms he stripped from Mezentius, that strong captain, a trophy to you, Mars, the great god of war. Aeneas fixes the crest still dripping in blood, the enemy's splintered spears and breastplate, battered hard and pierced in a dozen places. Fast to the left hand he straps the brazen shield, and down from the neck he hangs the ivory-hilted sword. Then he turns to his comrades, bands of officers pressing round him there, and Aeneas starts in to stir their spirits, flushed with recent triumphs. What magnificent things we've done, my friends! Dismiss all fears for what's still left to do. These are the spoils stripped from a proud king, our first fruits of battle. This is Mezentius, the work of my right hand. Now on we go to the Latian king, his city walls. Sharpen your swords with heart and pin your hopes on war. No taking us off guard, no hanging back, no dread must cripple our steps with anxious second thoughts. When the gods allow us to pull our standards up, strike camp, and move the enemy out. But now, commit our friends' unburied bodies to the earth, their only tribute down in the depths of hell. Go, he cries, deck with funeral gifts those heroes' souls. They won this land for us with their own blood. But first, send Pallas home to Evander's grieving city, a soldier who never lost heart when the black day swept him off and drowned him in bitter death. So Aeneas says, in tears, turning back to his gates, where Pallas's lifeless body lay outspread, guarded by old Aeneid. He bore Evander's arms in Arcadia once, but the omens were less bright when he marched out with Pallas, beloved foster son. Around them flocked a retinue, crowds of Trojans and Trojan women, their hair unbound in the mourner's way. But then, as soon as Aeneas enters the high-built gates, they beat their breasts and raised their cries to the sky, and the royal lodging groaned with wails of grief. Aeneas, gazing at Pallas resting there, his head, his face bled white, and his smooth chest splayed apart by a Latin spear, the tears came welling up with words of sorrow. Child of heartbreak, was it you whom fortune denied me, coming to me all smiles? Now you will never live to see our kingdom born, never ride in triumph home to your father's house. A far cry from the pledge I made Evander for his son. Embracing me as I left that day, he sent me out to win ourselves an empire, fearful, warning that we would face brave men, a battle-hardened people. So even now, gripped by his own empty hopes, he may be paying his vows, perhaps, and loading the altar down with gifts, while we, with shows of grief and hollow tributes, bring him a lifeless son who owes no more, now, to any god on high. Unlucky man, you must behold the agonizing burial of your son. Is this how we return? Our long for triumph? Is this my binding pledge? Ah, but Evander, you will never see him retreat, hit by a shameful wound, never pray for a father's wretched death, disgraced by a son who still lives safely on. O Italy, oh, what a rugged bastion you have lost! How great your loss, my Iulus! Morning done, he commands his troops to lift the stricken body high, and sends 1,000 men, picked from the whole corps, to escort the rites and join in the father's tears. A small comfort offered a grief so great, but owed to a father's heartache. Others lost no time, braiding with wickerwork a soft, pliant bier, weaving shoots of arbutus, sprigs of oak, shrouding the piled couch with shady leaves. Here on his raised rustic bed they placed the boy, and there he lies like a flower cut by a young girl's hand, some tender violet bloom or drooping hyacinth spray. Its glow and its lovely glory still not gone, though Mother Earth no longer nurses it now or gives it life. Then Aeneas carried out twin robes, stiff with purple and gold braid, that Dido of Sidon made with her own hands once, just for Aeneas, loving every stitch of the work, and weaving into the weft a glinting mesh of gold. Heartsick, he cloaks the boy with one as a final tribute, covering locks that soon will face the fire. Then, heaping a mass of plunder seized in the Latin rout, Aeneas orders it borne home in a long cortege, adding the steeds and arms he stripped from foes. Behind their backs he strapped their hands. The captives he planned to send below as gifts to appease the shades, sprinkling Latin blood on the pyre that burned their corpses. He orders his own captains to carry tree trunks, clad in enemy arms, with the hated names engraved. Unlucky old Acotes, weighed down with the years, they help along as he beats his chest with fists, claws his cheek with his nails, and stumbling on, flings his full length to the ground. Chariots too are rolled along, splashed to the rails with Latin blood. And here comes Pallas's war horse, Blaze, regalia set aside, weeping, ambling on, big tears rivering down his face. And others bear the spear and helmet of Pallas. Turnus, the victor, commandeered the rest. There follows an army of mourners, Trojans all, and all the Tuscans. All the Arcadians march with arms reversed. After the long cortege of Pallas's friends had moved on well ahead, Aeneas drew to a halt, groaned from his depths, and spoke these last words. This same dark fate of battle commands me back to other tears. Hail forever, our great Pallas. Hail forever, and farewell. Aeneas said no more. Back he strode to his ramparts, back to camp. Now in came envoys sent from the Latin city, bearing olive branches and pleading for a truce. Those bodies, felled by the sword and strewn about the field, return them, let them lie with mounds of earth for cover. There is no fighting defeated men, robbed of the light. Spare them now. You called them your hosts once, and the fathers of your brides. Good Aeneas grants the appeal he'd never shun. He treats them kindly, and adds these gracious words. What unmerited stroke of fortune, men of Latium, traps you so in war that you flee from us, your friends? Peace for the dead, cut down by the lots of battle, that's your plea? I'd grant that to the living too. I'd never have come if fate had not ordained me here a house and home. Nor do I make war with your people. It's your king who renounced our pact of friendship, choosing to trust to Turnus's force of arms. Why, it would have been fairer for Turnus to meet this death. If the soldier means to finish off our war by force, to rout the Trojans now, he should have clashed with me and my weapon then, in combat man to man. One of us would have lived, the one whom Mars, or his own right arm, had granted life. Go now, ignite the pyre beneath your luckless dead. Aeneas closed. They all stood silent, trading startled glances fixed on each other, hushed. Then aged Drances, always quick to attack the young captain, Turnus, full of hatred and accusations, breaks forth to have his say. Man of Troy, great in fame, greater in battle, how can I sing your praises to the skies? What to commend first? Your sense of justice, your awesome works of war? Surely we'll carry back to our walls these words of yours with grateful hearts, and if fortune points the way, ally you with our king, Latinus. Turnus can find his allies for himself. We'll even be glad to raise your mighty walls ordained by fate, glad to shoulder up the foundation stones of Troy. All as one, his comrades murmured yes to Drances' offer. Now for a dozen days they made their truce, and peace intervening, Trojans and Latins mingled safely, ranging the woods and mountain ridges side by side. And soaring ash trees ring to the two-edged iron axe, and they bring down pines that towered toward the skies. There is no pause in the work as the wedges split the oak and fragrant cedar. The groaning wagons haul down from the slopes huge rowan trunks. Rumor, already in flight with the first alarms of sorrow, fill Evander's ears. Evander's walls and palace. Rumor that just had trumpeted Pallas's Latian triumph. Arcadians throng to gateways, grasping funeral brands in the old archaic way, and the torches light the road, searing a long line through the flatlands far and wide. Joining forces with them, the Trojan escorts mass to form a growing column of mourners on the march. Once Arcadia's mothers saw them nearing their homes. Their wailing set the walls on fire with grief. and no force in the world can stop Evander now. Into the crowd he goes, and as the bier is lowered, throws himself on Pallas, clinging for dear life, sobbing, groaning, his sorrow all but choking his voice that thrusts a passage through at last. A far cry from the pledge you made your father, Pallas, that you would do nothing rash the day you trusted yourself to the savage god of war. How well I knew the thrill of a boy's first glory in arms, the heady sweetness of one's first fame in battle. But how bitter the first fruits of a man's youth, the hard lessons learned in war, so near at hand, and none of the gods would hear my vows, my prayers. And you, my wife, most blessed woman in all the world, how lucky you were to die, spared this wrenching grief. But I defeated fate, a father doomed to outlive his son. If only I'd joined ranks with our Trojan comrades here, and Latin spears had hurled me down, and I had given my own life, and the long last march brought me, not Pallas, home. Not that I blame you, Trojans, nor our pacts, our friendship sealed by a hand clasp. No, this fate was assigned to me in my old age. But if my son was doomed to an early death, to know he died after killing Volscian hordes, and died as he led the Trojans into Latium, that will be my joy. Nor do I think you merit any other burial rites than good Aeneas grants, and the Trojan heroes, Tuscan chiefs as well, and Tuscan armies, bearing your great trophies, stripped from the men your right arm killed in war. And you too, Turnus, would now be standing here, a tremendous trunk of oak, decked out in armor if Pallas had had your years and strength to match. But why in my torment hold the Trojans back from battle? Go, take this word to your king, remember it well. The reason I linger out this life I loathe, Aeneas, now Pallas is dead and gone, is your right arm that owes, as you well know, the life of Turnus to a son and father both. That is the only field left free to you now, to prove your worth and fortune. I look for no joy in life, the gods have ruled that out, just to bear the news to my son among the dead. Soon the dawn had raised her light that gives men life, wretched men, calling them back to labor and mortal struggle. Now Captain Aeneas, now Tarchon, erected pyres along the sweeping shore. And here they carried the bodies of their dead in the old ancestral way, as the dark funeral fires blazed up from below to shroud the high skies in pitch-dark smoke. 3 times they ran their ritual rounds about the burning pyres, armed in gleaming bronze. 3 times they rode on horseback, circling the fires lit in mourning, lifting their wails of sorrow. Tears wet the earth, tears wetting the armor. The shouting of fighters soared, the clashing blare of trumpets. Some heave on the flames, their plunder stripped from the Latin ranks they killed, their helmets, burnished swords, bridles, chariot wheels still growing hot, while others burn their offerings well known to the dead, their shields, their spears that had no luck. And round about they slaughter droves of cattle, carcasses offered up to death, and bristling swine and beasts led in from the fields are butchered all over the flames. Then down the entire shore they watch their comrades burn as men stand guard at the pyres now dying out, nor can they tear themselves away till the dank night comes wheeling round the heavens studded with fiery stars. No less in another zone, the grieving Latins raise up countless pyres too. For they had many dead, and some they bury in earth, some they lift and bear off to the nearby fields, and the other dead they carry back to town. All the rest they burn, unnumbered and unsung. An enormous tangled mass of bloody carnage waits, and the wasteland far and wide lights up with fires, with pyre and on pyre, striving to outblaze the last. The third day rose, driving the night's chill from the sky, as the mourners raked the embers, leveling off the ashes mixed with bones, and piled the gravesite high with mounds of earth still warm. Now in the homes in King Latinus' city that overflowed with wealth, the breaking wails and long dirges reached their climax. Here the mothers and grief-stricken brides of the dead and their loving sisters, hearts torn with sorrow, and young boys robbed of their fathers, cursed this horrendous war and Turnus' marriage. He himself, they cry, he should decide it all with his own sword and shield, since he lays claim to the realm of Italy, claims the lion's share of honor for himself. And caustic Drances lends weight to their side. He swears that Turnus alone is summoned, he alone called forth to battle. But opposing them at once, a mix of views and voices rises up for Turnus. The famous name of the queen holds out its shield, and the hero wins support for his many feats, his trophies in war. Now, amid the din, as the fiery controversy flared, look, to top it off, the grim-set envoys enter, bearing the news from Diomedes' noble city. Nothing has been won for all our attempts, nothing achieved by all our gifts, our gold, our fervent appeals. We Latins must look elsewhere, hunt for other allies, or press for peace at once at the hands of the Trojan king. Crushing news. Even King Latinus is overwhelmed. It's clear, Aeneas comes by the will of fate, the word on high. So the wrath of the gods declares the fresh dug graves before Latinus' eyes. And so he convenes a council, all the leading captains mustered at his command, inside the lofty gates. They all collected now, crowding into the royal halls through the milling streets. Throned in their midst, greatest in years and first in power, sits Latinus, the king's brow hardly marked by joy. He orders the envoys, home from Aetolia's city, to tell all the reports they carry back, demanding the truth from each man in turn. A hush fell as Vinulus, following orders, tells his story. My countrymen, we have seen Diomedes, seen the Argive camp. We've made the long march and survived its many dangers. We have grasped the hand that toppled Troy. The victor king was still building his city. Agrippa, named for his father's Argive stock, in Iapix's realm, the fields round Mount Garganus. Once we entered, allowed to appeal before the king, we offered our gifts, told him our names, our native land, and who had attacked us, what had drawn us to Arpi. He heard our pleas, and replied with calming words. You happy people, happy men of old Ausonia, land where Saturn ruled, what drives you now to shatter your blessed peace? What spurs you to rouse the hells of war you've never known? We who defiled the fields of Troy with swords, why mention all the pain we drank to the dregs, fighting beneath those walls, or the men we lost, drowned in Simois river? Strewn across the world, we all have borne unspeakable punishments. Yes, we've paid the price in full for all our crimes. Even Priam might pity our embattled troops. The grim star of Minerva, she bears witness. So do Euboea's crags and Capharis's vengeful cliffs. Caught in that war's wake, we have been driven to many shores. Atreus' son, Menelaus, right up to the pillars of Proteus, long in exile now. Ulysses had seen the Cyclops on Mount Etna. Shall I tell you of Neoptolemus's brief reign? The house of Idomeneus tumbled to the ground? The Locrians standing out on Libya's coast? Even he, the Mycenaean commander of all Greece, the moment he crossed the threshold, down he went at the hands of his wicked queen. The conqueror of Asia, an adulterer, crouched in wait to lay him low. Just think, the envious gods denied me and my return to my father's altars, or one glimpse of the wife I yearned for so, or the lovely hills of Calydon. I'm still stalked by the sight of terrifying omens. My comrades gone, flown off to the skies on wings, or they roam the streets as birds. How brutal! The punishment all my people have endured, and they make the cliffs re-echo with their cries. Such disasters were in the stars. From that day on that I like a maniac attacked an immortal's body, my sword defiled the hand of Venus with a wound. No, don't press me to face such battles now. I've had no strife with the Trojans since Troy fell, nor do I think of those old griefs with any joy. And as for the gifts you bring me from your homeland, give them to Aeneas. I've stood up against his weapons. We've gone man to man. Trust me, I know just how fiercely the fighter rises up behind his shield, what a whirlwind rides on that man's spear. If Troy had borne 2 others to match Aeneas, Trojan troops would have marched on Greece's cities. Greece would now be grieving, fate turned upside down. Whatever the standoff round the sturdy walls of Troy, with Greek victory hanging fire until the 10th year came, was all thanks to Aeneas's and Hector's strong right arms. Both men shone in courage. Both men blazed in combat, Aeneas the more devout. Join hands in pacts of peace while you still have the chance. Don't join battle, sword to sword. Be on your guard. Now then, you have heard, great king, the king's response, the view he takes of this mighty war of ours. The envoys had barely closed when a troubled groan came murmuring from the Italian's anxious lips, and mounted as when the rocks resist a stream in spate, and the dammed-up tide goes churning, sounding out as it beats from bank to bank with the waters roaring white. Once their spirits calmed down, and the anxious din died down. First, the king salutes the gods from his high throne, and then begins. If only before now, men of Latium, we had resolved this dire crisis. How I wish we had called a council then. Far better then, not now, with the enemy camped before our walls. What an ominous war we wage, my countrymen. Fighting people descended from the gods, unbeaten heroes, never wearied in battle. Even in defeat, they can't put down the sword. If you had any hope of winning Aetolian allies, give it up now. Each man to his own best hope. But now you can see how slim your hopes have been. The rest of your prospects? All lie in shambles. Look with your own eyes. Feel with your own hands. I blame no one. The most that valor could do, valor has done. We have fought the good fight with all our kingdom's power. Now at this point, torn as I am with doubts, here is what I propose. I will tell it in brief. Come, listen closely. I have an age-old tract along the Tiber River, stretching west beyond the Sicanian border. Here the Auruncans and Rutulians sow their crops, plow the rugged hills, and graze the wildest banks. Let this entire spread, plus highlands ringed with pines, be given the Trojans now to win their friendship. And let us draft a treaty just in every term, and invite the Trojans to share our kingdom. Let them settle here, if so their hearts desire, and build their city walls. But if they are bent on seizing other countries, other people now, and it's in their power to put our land astern, then we'll build them 20 ships of Italian oak. More if they have the crews. The timber is stacked ashore. Let them set out the number, the class of ship they need. We can supply the bronze, the shipwrights, docks, and tackle. I also propose, to bear the news, confirm the pact, that 100 envoys be dispatched, elite Latin stock, their arms laden with boughs of peace and bearing gifts, 100 weights of gold and ivory, throne and robe. Our royal emblems, confer among yourselves, shore up our shattered fortunes. Drances rises, aggressive as always, stung by Turnus's glory, spurred by smarting, barely hidden envy, a lavish spender, his rhetoric even looser, but a frozen hand in battle. No small voice in the public councils, always a shrewd adviser, a power in party strife. On his mother's side, well born, his father's side remains a blank. Drances rises now, his urgings fuel their fire. Our situation is clear for all to see, and it needs no voice of ours in council now, my noble king. The people know, they admit they know what destiny has in store, but they flinch from speaking out. Let him allow us to speak, and quit his puffed-up pride, that man whose unholy leadership and twisted ways. Oh, I'll let loose, he can threaten me with death. So many leading lights among us he's snuffed out that we can see our entire city plunged in grief while he, trusting that he can break and run, attacks the Trojans, terrorizing the heavens with his spears. Just add one gift to the hordes you tell us now to give and pledge the Dardans. Just one more, my generous king. Let no one's violence overwhelm your power here, as a father to give his daughter to a man, an outstanding man, a marriage earned in full and sealed by pacts of peace that last forever. But if such terror grips our hearts and minds, let us beg a favor of our fine prince. Turnus, surrender to king and country their due rights. Why keep flinging your wretched people into naked peril? You are the root and spring of all the Latins' griefs. There's no salvation in war. Peace, we all beg you, Turnus, bound with the one inviolate pledge of peace. I've come first, the man you think your enemy, and what if I am? I am here to implore you now, pity your own people. Surrender your pride. You're beaten. Now retreat. Rooted so, we have seen our fill of death. Vast tracts we have left a wasteland. Or if glory spurs you on, if your strength is still like oak, if the dowry of a palace seems so very dear to your heart, courage. Chest out, meet your enemy head on. But of course, so Turnus can fetch his royal bride, our lives are cheap, scattered in piles across the field, unburied and unwept. Come, Prince, if you have the spine, if you have any spark of your father's warring spirit, look, your challenger calls you out to fight. Turnus groans under that barrage. His fury breaks into fire, and the outrage bursts from the soldier's deep heart. Always a mighty flood of words from you, Drances, when battle demands our fighting hands. Whenever the Senate's called, you're first to show your face. But there is no earthly need to fill these halls with the talk that flies so bravely from your mouth. Safe as you are while the ramparts keep the enemies out, and the trenches still don't overflow with blood. So bluster away with your bombast. That's your style. Brand me for cowardice, Drances, whence your arm has left as many piles of slaughtered Trojans, decked as many fields with brilliant trophies. Now, we're free to set what courage and quickness can achieve, or to see what courage and quickness can achieve. No long hunt for the foe. As you may have noticed, they camp around our walls on every side. Come, shall we march against them? You hang back. Why? Will your warlust always lie in your windy words and your craven racing feet? Beaten am I? Who could rightly call me beaten? You swine, who bothers to see the Tiber's crest with Trojan blood and Evander's house uprooted, razed to the earth, and all his Arcadian fighters stripped of arms? That's hardly the man that Pandarus and Bidius met when those two giants confronted me, and the 1,000 men whom I, in a single day, sent down to hell in all my triumph, trapped as I was inside the enemy's rugged walls. So, there's no salvation in war, you say? Go sing that song, you fool, for the Trojan chief, your own prospects too. Keep on striking your huge panic in all our hearts, praising to high heaven the strength of a people beaten twice, disdaining the forces of Latinus. Now, I suppose, the Myrmidon captains, cringe before the Phrygian armies. Now Diomedes, now Larissaean Achilles, and Aufides's rapids rush back from the Adriatic's waves. But here's Drances, feigning terror at my rebukes, a scoundrel's shabby dodge, just to hone his charges hurled against me. You'll never lose your life, such as it is, not by my right hand, fear not. Just let it rest, beating inside that coward's chest of yours. But now, father, I come back to you and your resolves. If you no longer harbor any hope for our armies, if we are so alone, and at one repulse our forces are totally overwhelmed, good fortunes lost forever, let us reach out our helpless arms and plead for peace. Oh, if only we had a shred of our old courage left. I rate that man the luckiest among us, first in the work of war, first in strength of heart, who, spurning the sight of surrender, falls, dying, and bites the dust for one last time. But if we have troops and provisions still intact, and the towns and men of Italy still support our side, if the Trojans have also paid a bloody price for glory, they have their burials too. The same storm struck us both. Then why this shameful collapse before it all begins? Why tremble so before the trumpet blares? Many things the run of the days and shifting works of fickle time have turned from bad to good. Many men has two-faced fortune cheated, only to come back and set them up on solid ground once more. Diomedes, true, and his city Arpi will offer us no relief. But Messapus will, I trust, Tolumnius will, that soldier of fortune, and all the captains sent by so many lands, and so no small glory waits for the men picked out from Latian and Laurentine fields. And Camilla too, our ally sprung from Volscian stock, heading her horsemen, squadrons gleaming bronze. But if the Trojans call me to single combat, if that's your will as well, and I am such a bar to the public good, then victory has not spurned or so hated these hands of mine that I would shrink from any risk when hopes are riding high. I will take him on with a will. Let him outfight the great Achilles, strap on armor the match for his, forged by Vulcan hands. Bring him on, I say. To all, to Latinus, the father of my bride, I, Turnus, second in fighting strength to none of the men who came before me, I devote my life. Aeneas challenges me alone? Challenge away, I beg you. And if the gods are raging now, don't let Drances appease them with his death instead of mine. If courage and glory are at stake, don't let Drances carry off the prize. But now, while they debated their heated, divisive issues, sparring back and forth, Aeneas struck camp and deployed his lines for battle. Then, in the thick of the din, suddenly, look, a messenger rushes in through the royal palace, spreading panic through the city. Armies marching! Trojan and Tuscan allies pouring down from the Tiber, sweeping the whole plain. Confusion reigns at once, the people's spirits distraught, raked by the spur of rage. Shaking the fists, they shout, "To arms! Arms!" The ranks shout out while their fathers weep and groan. And now from all sides an enormous uproar, cries in conflict lift on the winds, like cries of bird flocks landing in some tall grove by chance, or swans with their hoarse calls clamoring out across the sounding pools of Padusa River stocked with fish. All right then, citizens, seizing his moment, Turnus calls. Summon your councils, sit there praising peace. Our enemies swoop down on our country full force. No more for them. No more for them. Up he leapt and raced from the halls, shouting, You, Volusus, call your Volscian units to arms. Move your Rutulians out. Messapus, array the cavalry. You and your brother Chorus, range them down the plains. Another contingent, guard the gates and man the towers. The rest, attack with me where I command. At once, they rushed to the walls from all parts of the city. King Latinus himself, shocked by the sudden crisis, leaves the council, delays his own noble plans till a better hour. Over and over faults himself for not embracing Trojan Aeneas with open arms, adopting him as his son to shield the city. Others are digging trenches before the gates, hauling up on their shoulders stones and spikes. And the raucous trumpet sounds the signal, Bloody war! Then a mixed cordon of boys and mothers rings the walls as the long-last struggle calls them all together. Here is the queen, with a grand cortege of ladies, bearing gifts and riding up to Minerva's temple, set on the heights, and beside her rides the girl, the Princess Lavinia, cause of all their grief, her lovely eyes bent low. Taking their lead, the ladies fill the shrine with the smoke of incense, pouring out their wails from the steep threshold. You, power of armies, queen of the battle, Pallas, virgin goddess, shatter that Phrygian pirate's spear. Himself, hurl him headlong down, sprawled at our high gates. And Turnus, in matchless fury, gears himself for war. Now he's buckled his breastplate, gleaming, ruddy bronze with its bristling metal scales, encased his legs in gold, his temples still bare, but his sword was strapped to his side, as down from the city heights he speeds in a flash of gold in all his glory, in all his hopes already locked fast, with the enemy, wild as a stallion bolting the paddock, burst free of the reins at last, he commands the open plain, making for pasture. Out for the herds of mares, or keen for a plunge in the river runs he knows so well, he charges off, his proud head flung back, neighing, racing on, reveling in himself, his mane sporting over his neck and shoulders. Rushing to meet him came Camilla, riding up with her armed Volscian ranks, and under the gates the princess sprang from her horse, and following suit her entire troop dismounted in one gliding flow as their captains speak out. Turnus, if the brave deserve to trust themselves, I'm steeled, I swear, to engage the cavalry of Aeneas, foray out alone to confront the Tuscan squadrons. Permit me to risk the first shock of battle. You stay here on foot and guard the walls. Turnus, his eyes trained on the awesome young girl, responded, Pride of Italy, princess, what can I do or say to show my thanks? But since that courage of yours would leap all bounds, come share the struggle with me. Aeneas, as rumor has it, and posted scouts report, has recklessly sent his light horse on ahead to harass the plains, while he himself, crossing the mountain's height by a lonely, desolate ridge, he's moving on the city. I am setting an ambush deep in a hollowed, woody path and posting troops to block the passage through at both ends of the gorge. You take on the Etruscan cavalry, frontal assault, flanked by brave Messapus, the Latin horsemen and squadrons of Tiburtus. You too assume a captain's joint command. With equal zeal, he rallies Messapus, rallies allied chiefs, and spurring them into battle, marches on the foe. There is a valley full of twists and turns, a perfect spot for the lures and subterfuge of battle, both of its sides closed off and dark with thick brush. A cramped path leads the way, a tightening pass, a difficult entry takes you in, a ready trap. And over it all, amid the hilltop, lookout points, there's high ground, hidden, good safe shelter. Whether you'd like to attack from left or right, or stand on the ridge and roll huge boulders down. Now, here Turnus heads, by a track he knows by heart, and staking his ground, he lurks in the woods in ambush. Well high on Olympus, Diana called swift Opus, one of her virgin comrades, one of her sacred troop, and the goddess spoke in tears. Camilla's moving out to a brutal war, dear girl, strapping on our armor all for nothing. I love her like no one else, and it's no new love, you know, that stirs Diana, no sweet lightning bolt of passion. Once, when that tyrant, Metibus, loathed by people for his abuse of power, was drummed from his kingdom, leaving Pervernum, ancient town, he took his daughter, a baby with him, fleeing the thick and fast of battle, a friend to share his exile. Camilla, he called her, changing her mother's name, Casmilla, just a bit. Holding her in his arms, he made for the ridges, wild, dense with woods, with enemy weapons raining down around them, Volscian forces closing for the kill. And suddenly, as they flew, Amasenus overflowed. Look, foaming over its banks, such violent cloudbursts broke. About to swim for it, Metibus stopped short, stayed by his love for his child, fear for that dear burden. As he racked his brains, desperate, deeply torn, he lit on a quick decision. His own huge spear, the fighter luckily bore it in his grip, rugged with knots, the oak wood charred hard. Rolling her up in cork bark stripped from the tree, he lashed her fast to the weapon, just mid-haft, and balancing both in his right hand, he praised to the skies. Bountiful one, to you, lover of groves, Latona's daughter, a father devotes his baby girl. Yours is the first spear she grasps as she flees the enemy through the air, pleading for your mercy. Receive her, goddess, your very own, I pray you. Now I commit my child to the fickle winds. With that, cocking back his arm, he sends the javelin whirring on, and the river roars out as over the churning rapids poor Camilla flies along the whizzing shaft. But now as the enemy fighters harry Metibus even more, he flings himself in the stream, and flushed with triumph, prized from the turf his spear and baby girl as one, his gift to you, Diana, goddess of the crossroads. No home, no city, walls would give them shelter, nor would he have consented, fierce man that he was. No, a shepherd's life on the lonely mountains, that's the life he led. There in the brush and the rough lairs of beasts, he nursed his child on raw milk from the dugs of a wild broodmare, milking its udders into her tender lips. And then, when the toddler had taken her first hesitant steps, Metibus armed her hand with a well-honed lance and slung from her tiny shoulder bow and arrows. No gold band for her hair, no long flaring cape, A tiger skin that covered her head hung down her back. With a hand, uncalloused still, she flung her baby spears, swirled a slingshot round her head with its supple strap, and bagged a crane or snowy swan by the Strymond's banks. Many a mother in Tuscan cities yearned for her as a daughter. Futile. Diana's her only passion. She nurses a lifelong love of chastity and the hunt while she remains untouched. If only she'd never been carried away to serve in such a war. Bent on challenging Trojans, she'd still be one of my loyal comrades, still my dear girl. Action! Watch, a terrible destiny drives her on. Down you dive from the high skies, Opus, my nymph. Light out for the Latin lands, where battle flares and the omens all are bad. These weapons, take them. Pluck from the quiver an arrow fletched for vengeance. Use it. Whoever defiles her sacred body with a wound, Trojan, Italian, make him pay me an equal price in blood. Then I will fold her in cloud, poor girl, with all her gear, and bear Camilla's unsullied body home to a tomb, and lay her to rest in her own native land. At that, Opus drove down from the sky through a light breeze, her body wrapped in a whirlwind dark as night, and whirring on her way. But all the while the Trojan forces are closing on the walls. Etruscan chiefs and a massed army of cavalry, squaring off in squadrons, rank by rank. Across the entire field, the snorting chargers stamping, fighting their tight reins and veering left or right, and the plains are bristling a jagged crop of iron spears. Everywhere, fields ablaze with weapons brandished high. At the same time, grouping against the Trojan lines, Messapus, the swift Latins, Chorus, his brother too, and the young Camilla's wing, all marched into sight, right arms cocked back, thrusting javelins forward, shaking vibrant lances, infantry tramping into position, battle stallions panting, planes mounting to fever pitch. And once both armies had closed to a spear's cast away, they reined back to a halt, then abruptly surged forward, shouting, whipping their teams into a combat frenzy, weapons pelting thick as a snowstorm shrouds the skies in darkness. At once, Tyrrhenus and the fierce Acontius charge each other, full tilt with their spears, and both are first to crash, shattering down with tremendous impact, splintering ribs of their black stallions, ramming chest to chest. Acontius, hurled off, drops like a lightning bolt or a dead weight shot forth from a siege engine, heaving headlong far away from his charger, gasping out his life breath on the winds. That moment the lines of fighters buckle, Latins, rooted, sling their shields on their backs and wheel their horses round to the walls as the Trojans drive them on with Acillus in the lead, his squadrons charging. Now they are nearing the gates when again the Latins raise a war cry, wrenching their horses' supple necks around while the Trojans, all rein slack, beat a deep retreat. Picture an ocean rolling, waves ebbing and flowing, now flooding onto the shore, smashing over the cliffs in a burst of foam and drenching the bay's sandy edge, now rushing in fast retreat, swallowing down the scree lost in the backwash, leaving the shallows high and dry. So twice the Etruscans hurled the Latins toward their walls, twice rooted. Glanced round, they cover their backs with shields. But when at the third assault, the whole front locked fast, fighting hand to hand, and each man picked out his man, then truly the groans of dying men break loose. Weapons, bodies, a sea of blood, massacred riders, half-dead horses, writhing together now in death, and the pitched battle peaks. Arsilochus fears to face the horseman Romulus, whirls a lance at his horse instead, planting the point below its ear, and furious, wild with the wound, it cannot bear the agony, rearing back, chest high, its hooves thrashing the air as Romulus, thrown free, rolls around in the dust. And Catulus brings down Iolus, then Herminius, massive in courage, immense in brawn and armor, his blond locks flowing bare and his shoulders bare, no fear of wounds, so huge his body exposed to spears. But Catulus's shaft goes hammering through him, quivering out his broad back, and it doubles up the man impaled with pain. Everywhere, black tides of blood, iron clashing, slaughter, fighters striving for death with glory through their wounds. Watch, exulting here in the thick of carnage, an Amazon, one breast bared for combat, quiver at hand, Camilla. Now she rifles hardened spears from her hand in salvos. Now she seizes a rugged double axe in her tireless grasp, Diana's golden archery clashing on her shoulder. Even forced to withdraw, she swerves her bow and showers arrows, wheeling in full flight. And round Camilla ride her elite companions, Tulla, young Larina, Tarpeia, brandishing high her brazen axe, daughters of Italy, all she chose to be her glory. Godlike Camilla's aids in peace and war, and wild as Thracian Amazons, galloping, pounding along the Thermodon's banks, fighting in burnished gear around Hippolyte. Or when Penthesilea, born of Mars, comes sweeping home in her car, an army of women lifts their rolling, shrilling cries in welcome, exulting with half-moon shields. Fierce young girl, who is the first, and who the last your spear cuts down? How many dying bodies do you spread out on the earth? Eunaeus, son of Clytius first, his chest unshielded, charging Camilla now, who runs her enemy through with her long pine lance, and he vomits spurts of blood, gnawing the gory earth, twisting himself around his wound as the Trojan breathes his last. Then Lyrus, Pegasus over him, Lyrus struggling to clutch his reins, thrown from his horse as it goes sprawling under him. Pegasus rushes to help his falling comrade, reaches out with an unarmed hand, and both of them, side by side, pitch headlong down. And adding kills, she takes Amastris, Hippotas' son. Then attacking at long range, with spear casts pierces Tereus and Harpalycus, then Demophoon, Chromis too, and for every shaft the girl let fly from her hand, another Phrygian fighter bit the dust. Here's Ornidas, riding his Apulian charger in from a distance, all decked out in exotic armor, the huntsman setting up for a soldier. A bull's hide covers his broad shoulders. The big yawning maw of a wolf with glistening fangs in its jaws protects his head, and a hunter's hook-tipped javelin arms his hand as into the press he goes, toppling all by a head. But Camilla runs him down, easy work with the ranks in full retreat, and spears him through, exulting over his body with all the hatred in her heart. Still in the woods, you thought, and a flushing game, my fine Etruscan hunter? Well, the day has come when a woman's weapons prove your daydream wrong. Still, you carry no mean fame to your father's shades. Just tell them this, you died by Camilla's spear. Lunging, she kills a pair of massive Trojans, Butes and Orsilochus. Butes, his back turned, she stabs between the helmet and breastplate, just when the horseman's neck shines bare and the shield on his left arm dangles down off guard. And fleeing Orsilochus now, as the Trojan drives her round in a huge ring, Camilla tricks him, wheeling inside him. Quick! The pursuer, now the pursued, as she rears above him, praying, begging for mercy. Her battle axe smashes down, blow after blow through armor, bone, splitting his skull. Warm brains from the wound go splashing down his face. Suddenly, right before Camilla, stunned with terror to see her there, stands Aunus' fighting son, an Apennine man, and not the least of Liguria's liars while the fates allow. Once he sees there is no running away from battle, no turning aside Camilla's attack, he tries to devise a ruse with all his craft and cunning, letting loose, "Now where's the glory, tell me? A woman putting her trust in a powerful horse? No more running away. Meet me on level ground, in combat, hand to hand. Gear up to fight on foot. You'll soon see why whose windy boasts of glory cheat him blind." Raked by this scathing taunt, Camilla blazes up in rage, hands off her horse to an aide, and takes her stand against the Ligurian, fearless on foot and armed like him with the naked sword and still unbattered shield. But quick as a flash, the soldier, certain his guile had won the day, runs away himself, yanking his reins around and digging iron spurs in his racing stallion's flanks. "Ligurian fool, so bloated with all your empty pride, pulling your slippery inbred tricks for nothing? Fraud will never carry you home safe and sound to your lying father Aunus. So young Camilla cries, and lightning fast on her feet outruns the charger, snatches the reins, and facing her enemy dead on, makes him pay with his own detested blood. Quick as Apollo's falcon, wheeling down from a crag, outraces a dove in flight to a high cloud, seizes it, clutches it, hooked talons ripping its insides out, its blood and plucked feathers drifting down from the sky. But the father of men and gods, far from blind, throned on his steep Olympian peak, observe it all, and stirs Etruscan Tarchon into the savage fighting, lashing the trooper on with the rough spur of rage. So into the bloody buckling lines rides Tarchon, goading his horsemen on with a burst of mixed cries, rallying each by name, spurring the rooted back to battle. What's your fear, you Tuscans, forever deaf to shame, always slacking off? What cowardice saps your courage? What? Is a woman rooting squadrons strong as ours? Why have swords or useless lances gripped in our fists? But you're not slow when it comes to nightly bouts of love, when the curved flute strikes up some frantic Bacchic dance. Linger on for the feasts and cups at the groaning board. That's your love, your lust, till the seer will bless and proclaim the sacrifice, and the rich victim lures you into deep groves. With that, he whips his warhorse into the press, braced to die himself. He rushes Venulus headlong, sweeps him off his mount, and hugging his enemy tight to his chest with its clenched right arm, gallops away with him, racing off full tilt. A cry hits the skies. All the Latins turn to watch as Tarchon flies like wildfire down the field, bearing the man and weapons both, then wrenches off the iron point of Venulus' spear and delves round for a spot laid bare where a lethal blow might land, the others fighting off the enemy's hand from his throat, pitting force against fury. Swift as a golden eagle seizes a snake and towers into the sky, talons knotted round it, claws clutching fast, but the wounded serpent writhes in its rippling coils, stiffens, scales bristling, hissing through its fangs as it rears its head. But all the more the eagle keeps on digging into its struggling victim, its hooked beak ripping away, its wings thrashing the air. So Tarchon sweeps his kill, right from the Tiber's column. Tarchon, flushed with triumph, following hard on their captain's feet in clear success. The Etruscans swing to attack as Aron starts to circle swift Camilla, a match for her spear yet, more adept at cunning. His life is doomed by the fates, but now he tests his luck for the quickest way in. Wherever Camilla rages, plunging into the front, there Aron stalks her, quietly tracks her steps, whenever she downs a foe and turns around for home. Round he tugs at his fast reins and ducks from sight. Now this approach, now that, exploring the circuit round from every side, he shakes his fatal spear in his ruthless fist. By chance, Clorius, sacred to goddess Cybele, once her priest, Camilla spied him at long range, gleaming in Phrygian gear, spurring a lathered warhorse decked with a coat of mail, its brazen scales meshing with gold like feathers stitched. He himself, aflame in outlandish reds and purples, shot Gortinian shafts from a Lycian bow, a bow of gold slung from the priest's shoulders. Gold his helmet, too, and he'd knotted his saffron cape in flaring linen pleats with a tawny golden brooch, his shirt in barbarous leggings stiff with needled braid. Camilla, keen to fix some Trojan arms on a temple wall or sport some golden plunder out on the hunt, she tracked him now, one man in the moil of war. She stalked him wildly, recklessly through the ranks, afire with a woman's lust for loot and plunder when, grasping his chance at last, rising up from ambush, Aron flings his spear with a winged prayer aloft. Apollo, highest of gods, lord of holy Soracte, we worship you first and foremost, honor your fires stoked by cords of pine, and we your celebrants, firm in our faith, we plant our feet in your embers glowing hot. Grant, Father, our shame be blotted out by our spears, almighty god Apollo. I am not bent on plunder stripped from a girl, no trophy over her corpse. My other feats of arms will win me glory. If only this murderous scourge drops dead beneath my strokes, back I'll go to my father's towns, unsung. Apollo heard, and willed that part of the prayer would win the day. But part he scattered abroad on the ruffling winds. That Aaron should cut Camilla down in sudden death, that he granted, true, but not that his noble land should see him home again, and the gusting south winds swept that prayer away. So when he sent his javelin hissing through the air, and all the Volscians, wheeling, trained their eyes and alert minds on the princess, she was numb to it all, the draught, the hiss, the weapon sent from the blue, until the spear went ripping through her, under her naked breast, and it struck deep. It hammered home and drank her virgin blood. Her frightened comrades hurried to brace their falling queen, but Aaron's races off, more frantic than all the rest, his triumph mixed with terror, no longer trusting his spear, or daring to meet the young girl's weapons point blank. Like the wolf that's killed some shepherd or hulking ox, and before attacking spears can catch him, races off at once, darting into the pathless hills for cover, he knows he's done some outrage, frantic now. He tucks his trembling tail between his legs and heads for the woods. So Aaron's, shaken, slinking from sight, content with bare escape, loses himself in the milling lines of fighters. Camilla, dying, tugs at the spear, but the iron point stands fixed in the deep wound, wedged between her ribs. She's faint from loss of blood, her eyes failing, chill with death, and the glowing color she had once fades away. Then, as she breathes her last, she calls to Acca, alone of her young comrades, more than all the others true to Camilla, the only one with whom she shares her care, and here is what she says. This far, Acca, my sister, and I can go no further. Now, the raw wound saps my strength, darkness everywhere, closing in around me. Go quickly, carry my last commands to Turnus, take over the fighting, free the town from Trojans. Now, farewell. With Camilla's last words, she lost her grip on the reins and, all against her will, slipped down to the ground. Little by little she grew cold, and wholly freed of her body, laid down her head as her neck drooped limp in the clutch of death, and she let her weapons fall. Camilla's life breath fled with a groan of outrage, down to the shades below. And then, at that, an immense cry rose up and hit the golden stars. With Camilla down, the melee peaks to a new pitch, the masses surging forward, the whole Trojan army, Etruscan captains, Evander's Arcadian wings. But all the while, Diana's sentry, Opus, posted high on a ridge, has scanned the fighting unperturbed. And when at a distance she could see, clear in the thick of battle, war cries, warriors' fury, Camilla beaten down by the brutal stroke of death, she moaned, crying out from the bottom of her heart, Too cruel, dear girl, too cruel for the price you pay for trying, begged to challenge the men of Troy in combat. What gain for you, your lonely life in the forest, serving Diana, our quiver round your shoulder? But your queen has not deserted you, shorn of honor, not in your hour of death. Nor will your death lack glory among the race of man, nor will you bear the shame of dying unavenged. Whoever defiled your body with that wound will pay with the death that he deserves. Under the mountain ridges stood an immense mound of earth, hedged with shady ilex, the tomb of Dersinus, an old Laurentine king. Here with a swoop, the lovely goddess first took up her post, from the high ground looking for Aruns, and seeing him gleam in armor, puffed with pride. Why running away? She shouted. Step right up. Just come this way. To die. Collect the reward you've earned for Camilla's death. Just think, you are to die by the arrows of Diana. That said, the Thracian goddess plucked a wind shaft from her golden quiver. That said, the Thracian goddess, plucking a wind-swift shaft from her golden quiver, drew her bow with a vengeance, back to a full draw, till the curved horns all but touched, her balanced hands tense, left hand at the iron point, right hand at the bowstring, stretched to her breast. Then, the instant that Aruns heard the whizzing shaft and whirring air, The iron struck home in his flesh. As he gasps out his last, his oblivious comrades leave him sprawled in the nameless dust, and Opus flies away to Mount Olympus. Their captain gone, Camilla's light horse squadrons are first to flee. The harried Rutulians flee, and brave Aeneas too. Leaders rooted, and front-line men, their leaders lost, make for safety, swerving their horses, racing for the walls. But nothing can halt the Trojans' fierce offensive now. No weapons can stop them. Nothing stand against them. Home the Latins go, slack bows on sagging shoulders. Galloping hoofbeats pound the rutted plain with thunder. As a dust storm dark as night goes whirling towards the walls, the mothers stand at the lookouts, beating their breasts, raising the woman's shrilling wails to the starry sky. And the first Latins to rush through the open gates? Enemies mixing in with their own ranks crowd them hard, nor can they find escape from a wretched death. No, right at the entrance, just in their native walls, in the safe retreat of home, they're pierced by spears and pant their lives away. Some shut the gates, not daring to clear a safe way in for comrades, beg as they will, and a ghastly bloodbath follows. Defenders killed at the entries, enemies flung on swords. Shut out in front of their parents' faces, eyes streaming tears, some pitch headlong into the trenches, pressed by the root. Some charge wildly, reins flying, ramming the gateways blocked by the rugged posts. And even mothers up on the ramparts strive. Their genuine love of country marks the way. They'd seen Camilla fight. They hurl their weapons with trembling hands, daring to do the work of iron, with pikes of rugged oak and poles charred hard. Defending their city walls, they all burn to be the first to die. At the same time, the wrenching news hits Turnus still in the woods. It arrives in force as Acca brings her commander, word of stark disaster. Volscian units routed, Camilla fallen, enemy armies surging on, attacking on all fronts, and Mars in his triumph, panic already shakes the city walls. Turnus, in all his fury, that's what the ruthless will of Jove demands, abandons his hilltop ambush, quits the shaggy grove. He was barely out of sight and about to range the plain when Captain Aeneas, moving through the exposed pass, climbs the ridge and comes forth from the shady woods. So now, both men are speeding toward the walls, not many strides between their armies marching in total strength. Then, the moment Aeneas spied the dust storm swirling down the plain and the long lines of Latian fighters, Turnus spied Aeneas, savage in full armor, and caught the tramp of marching infantry, battle stallions panting. They would have clashed at once and tried their luck in war, but the ruddy sun has plunged his weary team in the western sea, and as daylight slips away, he brings the nightfall on. Now both armies come to a halt before the city, building dikes to fortify their camps. That's the end of Book 11.